Maestro, thank you very much for accepting this short interview. You're with us now on tour on Migros-Kulturprozent-Classics, and it's been a while. We had to wait so many years to have you back. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
Well, it's my first tour of Switzerland. So, I mean, I've been to some cities before. For instance, Geneva, I can't even tell you when I played in Geneva last time.
Oh, then we're even
I don't even remember.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But people remember you, and you saw that our halls are now full, everyone came to you. And my first question would be, how is it, Maestro, to cope with this burden to be, in a way, a legend in the music world? Is it difficult for you? Do you have to motivate each day yourself to say, I'm a legend, but I try to be as normal as possible?
Yeah, I look in the mirror every day and say, hello, good morning, legend. No. Every day is filled with so much work and so much to look forward to and so much to organize first in the head of how you organize the day, how you organize each rehearsal, then each audition, then we have, of course, meetings. And this is a perpetual motion that never finishes. And so we have to take just one at a time and be able to concentrate. This is very important.
How do you do this?
Every rehearsal you have to concentrate on, let's say, rehearsing the Eroica. Then I can't think of what I'm doing in Munich next week. At that time, I'm rehearsing Eroica. After that, if I have an audition, I have to really completely divorce myself from preconceived notions about what the singer should sing. I'm listening to that singer or to that violinist and judging. Then you have to give the person a chance to warm up, because I believe there are some auditions where after 5 minutes they say, thank you very much, this is not fair. So every audition has to be also done with a human standpoint to let the person relax. And then if he or she does not play something exactly well, he says, would you like to try it again? And, you know, etc. So that's what you do at auditions. Then there are auditions for the orchestra. Then there are, of course, press conferences, etc. But each unit has to be concentrated on. And that's very important.
It's focusing from the beginning. Is this been one of your greatest trains, to concentrate your immense energy and to focus it each time?
Well, it just happened naturally. I didn't decide in the beginning of my life, now I'm going to focus. Because in the beginning I didn't have that much work, you know. Today I have more than ever. When I left the New York Philharmonic in '91, I promised myself I will take 2 months off every season. It has never happened.
Would you like to do this now? Or do you think this is possible?
My wife would like me to do it. It just doesn't happen because there are obligations and there are projects that are so close to my heart that if somebody offers that to me, and most of these projects are usually where I'm not charging a fee or I'm doing it for a benefit in my spare time. So that's when it happens. Or I'm going to my country.
Yes. Do you go often to your country?
I go once in 2 years. It happens like that. I don't know when I'm going again. We went this year with the Maggio Fiorentino to India. We had wonderful occasions and concerts and public and.
Well, talking of the Maggio Fiorentino, it's an amazing orchestra, and the public, we had now 2 concerts in Zurich and in Bern. They were absolutely enthusiastic, and we have tonight in Lucerne, in Kakel. My question is, you've been there for, I think, if I may say, 25 years at least?
A little more, but
it's
about that time.
And this is quite unusual, because nowadays when I see how long a conductor is staying with an orchestra is between 3-5 years, maybe a little more. But this has created an amazing sound, an amazing perfection of the orchestra. Do you think that we might come back again to those times, Maestro, where someone was, not like Mravinsky maybe for 45 years, but someone was staying for a very, very long time, like being married to an orchestra?
Was Mravinsky 45 years?
40 years.
40 years. Then I've already gone past that in Israel. Amazing. Yeah. I think Ormandy was 44 years in Philadelphia. I think so. Right. I have to find out.
So you haven't
now that you mention it, yeah. Now that you mention it. No, I was never engaged in Florence to build an orchestra. You know, when I first started in '85, the first 2 seasons, I didn't even charge them money. I said, "You're in trouble." They had lost their music director, who left for another position. And they were like orphans. They came to see me in Israel. The orchestra committee, "Please help us. We don't know what to do. There's nobody here," etc. I don't know who was the Intendant in those days. I can't remember. So I said, "Okay, I'll come and help you." So I came 2 seasons and did 2 concerts each, and I didn't take money, just to help them out. And then, little by little, I was made the stabile, which I accepted. But nobody expected me, or even I didn't think I have to build an orchestra here. It happened. It happened. And today, after playing all the 9 Beethoven symphonies a few years ago and doing the Ring, these are if an orchestra can play Beethoven's 9 symphonies and really can play the Ring, they can play anything. There is nothing left. I'm not talking contemporary music.
Of course.
You have to do a little research. You have to play at the back of the violin. You have to hit the bow and all. So you have to, you know, but you don't have to go to school to learn to play all that. You just do what the composer asks you. But Wagner and Beethoven have written everything that an orchestra requires, that then you can play any symphony of Bruckner or Mahler or Richard Strauss, or for that matter then Stravinsky, etc. also. So this I have accomplished with this orchestra now, to play twice the Ring cycle, 2 different productions in 20 years, and the Beethoven cycle at least 2 or 3 times.
Amazing.
So, and now I could say, honestly, there is no standard missing in any instrument.
Right.
We are the highest standard of soloists in every category, and our string sections are getting better and better. What is needed now are good string instruments.
Yes.
And we are looking for sponsors who buy instruments and give it to the orchestra.
And who understand how important it is.
This is what I did in Los Angeles through the charity magnanimity of an old lady that I never met, who gave me, in her testament, $100,000 a year in the 60s, and I decided to buy instruments. And these instruments are still in the Los Angeles Philharmonic today, and they are played by the 3rd generation now. In other words, the musician, the virtuoso, retires, and the next generation comes, takes the same violin or cello, and goes on.
It's an amazing investment.
And this is a treasure in the Los Angeles Philharmonic.
And continues the tradition,
Yes,
of course.
yeah.
Maestro, it seems from what you're saying that many things in your life have come naturally. You have not forced maybe so much things to come.
Well, because I didn't force myself. I have patience. I wait for the right time to do the right piece. Next year I'm going to do Rosenkavalier. I have waited.
Well, one can hear in the
Coming
sound.
from Vienna, I should have conducted Rosenkavalier years ago, you know. And I know the music very well. I know the style. I just didn't have the opportunity, so I waited.
Is this something which you can also consider one of your strengths, that you are very patient? Because I think in this kind of career it's always been, and it will be always very difficult.
I was not ambitious about doing all the works at the same time. I once told a younger colleague of mine, who in the first instance was already recording all the Mahler symphonies. I said, "What is your hurry?" Said, "You know," I said, "what you are doing it all now. When you are really mature and when you really understand all the little, then you will want to record it, and then it will be too late. Nobody will want it second time from you." He didn't listen to me.
But when you started, I mean, I can imagine that it's never been easy. Actually, it's probably never easy to start a career like you did as a conductor.
I have never had any problem, first of all, of my being an Indian. Never. You know, some people do have. I had problems being an Indian only when I was assistant in Liverpool. I felt it very strongly. In the north of England, there was a certain...
Because people say, if you're an Indian, you cannot have this tradition of classical music.
They didn't say it to me,
Right.
but I felt it. But that's the only time I felt it in my life, never again. Never felt it in Vienna, never. Never with the orchestras. So that problem I didn't have. I didn't have a problem because I was too young.
Yeah, exactly. This would have been my second
Once
question.
it happened, I went to the Czech Philharmonic and did the Beethoven Ninth Symphony for the first time. Was a big mistake of mine. Because it's a great orchestra. And I should not have done it there for the first time.
Because they felt it.
Oh yeah, and they let me know that they felt it. I was prepared with the score.
Yeah.
I was not prepared to control the balances or to make the line in the adagio. I didn't know where I was. I was just conducting one bar after another, and musicians feel that. Musicians who have played it with other conductors so many times. So they didn't call me back for many years. Right. And the next time I went, after about 8 years, I said, now I'm going to do two pieces that I really know well. So I did the Rite of Spring and the Bruckner 8th Symphony. And then they couldn't stop, then there was a love.
They remembered it.
So sometimes when you're wrong, you make these miscalculations.
But it's maybe quite difficult sometimes when you're young and you get the chance to perform with such great orchestras, and they ask you very often for a piece. They say, take it or leave it. Isn't that a quite difficult
Sometimes
decision?
when you're young, they make programs for you.
Yeah.
And I accepted those programs. Like when I first went to Berlin Philharmonic, first time, they said you must do the Mahler First Symphony. And I had never done it.
Wow.
I had the good fortune, I was already in Los Angeles, and I went to Bruno Walter. I said, look, I have to conduct this in Berlin, and I've learned the score, can I please, he showed me many things.
Yeah,
many things. So I had this confidence that I went to the Berlin Philharmonic with the Mahler Symphony with Bruno Walter's advice to me.
Who knew Mahler so well, of course. And
the First Symphony. But to my luck, the Berlin Philharmonic didn't know it either. In 1961, you know, they didn't play Mahler so much. They didn't mean the conductors that conducted them didn't, because Mahler was not played in the Third Reich.
Yeah, it's true.
And afterwards, it was the same conductors, and they didn't know these pieces. So maybe they played it since 1945 once or twice, but when I started rehearsing it, I could see they don't know it. That was my good fortune, so that we learned it together.
But now...
And now, after 50 years, I went to Berlin 2 weeks ago, or last month, and I did the same program, and I told them, I said, you know, you are now third generation, you know it backwards, but your grandfathers, they didn't know it. I said it at the rehearsal.
But do you think, Maestro, that now when you look at the very young colleagues, because now we have a generation of very young conductors and...
Very talented young
conductors.
We have a new generation which is very talented, and I'm anxious to see how they are going to develop.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you give
But we are giving them chances.
Yeah.
The thing is that already they don't have time to come to Florence. Things like that, yes.
Well, this was actually what I wanted to ask you is, what advice do you give them? I mean, because one is the talent, of course. I will ask you another question also about the conducting itself, but they are very talented, but they lack maybe of some experience because they do many things for the first time.
Conducting is experience.
Well, that's exactly
Conducting is experience. My advice would be, if you have an orchestra, then stay with that orchestra and don't run around too much and learn your repertoire and your maturity. I had the good fortune to be in Los Angeles for 16 years. Yeah. In Israel, I started in 1969. I'm still, you know, going on there. And I did all my first experiences there. Exception was this Mahler First in Berlin. And I've been to Berlin and Vienna every year for 50 years. Those are my only real guest conducting. I still have never conducted the Cleveland Orchestra or San Francisco. Concertgebouw I did for the first time a few years ago. So I didn't go everywhere, and I was invited. I have never conducted the Boston Symphony.
Was it a choice of yours?
A choice. A conscious choice, that I'm not going to run around. And then what happens is, you run around and you do the same pieces everywhere, because you're confident. In Los Angeles, and then in Israel simultaneously, I did everything for the first time. And the advantage there is you do it 4 times. And in my time in Los Angeles, we would go 6 times to Santa Barbara, and 6 times to Long Beach, and 6 times to San Diego. So we would repeat the programs, which is good for the orchestra and good for me.
Of course.
Israel, we have so much public that every concert every program is repeated at least 6 times.
Amazing.
Yeah, it used to be 13 times. And then I said, no, 13 times is too much. Let's divide it. So that in one season, the orchestra also builds up a repertoire. And so that all helped me.
But there is, of course, the question, when you do Eroica, you've probably done it 100 times, I guess, at least. And now you're doing it on our tour.
Yeah.
How do you go about a piece like this, which is in your bones, in your blood? How do you, or where do you find each time the motivation, the strength to discover maybe something new? Because I heard now in 2 concerts, and they were different. Many things were different.
You as a musician hear it like that, and I agree. It depends on the mood of the musician too. But to answer your first question, how do I do it for the 100th time? It's love.
It's love.
You have to love it so much, and especially with this symphony. I can do this symphony every day of my life. I couldn't do the Beethoven 7th every day of my life. I couldn't, to be quite frank, you know. But the Eroica really, the Eroica is a revolution continuously. Before the Eroica, every classical symphony started with an introduction. He starts with 2 chords. That's it. Straight away the theme, you know. Mozart, the G minor symphony, starts also immediately. So these composers, towards Mozart at the end of his life and Beethoven already in the middle, he said, I don't need the introduction anymore. In the middle of the development of the first movement, Beethoven introduces for the first time a new melody that in Haydn, in 104 symphonies, didn't introduce a new melody. Beethoven is the next generation. It's the evolution.
And revolution,
you know?
really, yeah.
In the middle of the he goes in the key of G flat major. Nobody ever dared doing that. So one is so conscious of this continuous revolution of this man, you know. And then the last movement, the variations. Beethoven was a composer of variations, which was then adopted by Brahms. Brahms composed variations all his life, you know. And Beethoven with so many piano variations.
And even the Eroica variation, which he uses now in the 4th movement.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's based on passion and love.
It is the love for what you are doing. And then I love this orchestra very much. And you can see that each one is putting all his heart. Plus the fact that you are taking us to such good concert halls that every musician is loving to play, whether in Bern or
in Zurich or Geneva.
Yes, it's a discovery for them, because our hall in Florence is really not acceptable.
Right.
And we are looking forward to our new concert hall, opera house from December.
Wonderful.
We can't wait.
Wonderful. Which is extraordinary, actually, in our times, because we suffer some difficulties in Europe and in the whole world.
Yes, well, thank God Italy is celebrating 150 years, and the government decided this will be the flagship, the one thing to build for the 150 years.
Well, it could have been something different also.
Yes, and we know Florence needs an opera house for such a long time, because this current one was built by the Marshall Plan after the war with little money and little concentration on acoustical priorities. So we are very grateful now.
May I ask you a question as a conductor, which would be very interesting for me? When I was watching you yesterday and 2 days ago, your technique of conducting and turning to the people and focusing, what we said in the beginning, focusing on something, is so amazingly strong that each time the result is heard immediately. Which,
well, because these musicians are very attuned to
you.
My communication.
Right.
You know, I communicate not only with hands, but a lot with the eyes to prepare them beforehand, especially the soloists. But I'm also very flexible to what the soloist is doing. Yeah. Therefore, when you said at the beginning, it's a little different. Well, because the oboist in a funeral march, he has a different acoustical condition. He hears differently. He might take a little more time. So there I'm an accompanist of his. Then in the fugato, in the finale, I'm a conductor. I can't be an accompanist. I have to conduct the fugato. I have to prepare each section, etc. In the Mozart piano concerto, very talented pianist. But for instance, there was a difference between the piano of Bern and Zurich. Yes. In Zurich, the piano was of course good because the Steinway has always a good standard, but it was slightly newer probably, or harder to play on. And we discovered it at the rehearsal. So of course I let him more time in Zurich to play certain phrases. Because he told me, he said, I have to work much more.
So it's always a dialogue, actually.
Yeah,
you're listening and giving
But the Mozart piano concerto is a dialogue written by Mozart.
But from what I understand, it's also a dialogue between you and your musicians. Because sometimes I had the impression when you
also the fact that the orchestra is an opera orchestra, they're very flexible. They're used to hearing.
But you are flexible to them too, because what I saw, especially because you said in the funeral march, when the flute or oboe was playing, you were not conducting them really, you were going with them. You were just
well,
like
sometimes we are floating in space.
Right.
We are, but that Beethoven does that to us. You know, with the Israel Philharmonic, when I'm doing the Adagietto of the Mahler Fifth, which I now did on a European tour, I don't even know sometimes that I'm standing on the podium. Yeah. It is so ethereal. It is such a mystical moment. Yes. And the mystic in music is very important, that we can't conduct. Right. We can't organize that. That happens. Yeah. That just happens.
Are those moments in conducting on stage probably those who are the most beautiful and make music making so amazingly important to you?
And that can be not the whole performance, that can be a 4-bar phrase.
And magic, moments of magic.
That happens. And that happens with orchestras that you know very well. If you go as a guest conductor, I don't think it happens that
It's probably more
because the musicians don't know you and you don't know, etc. That's why I have never condoned or supported this continuous guest conducting.
Maestro, what do you think, when you look back on your experience, is probably the most important skill, maybe for yourself, but for a conductor, to be a good conductor?
Well, it's knowledge.
Knowledge.
Absolutely. We are conducting music that runs through about 400 years. The style in our music, let's say in Europe, changes every 50 years, a round figure. Style from Bach to his sons, adopted then by Haydn, going into Beethoven, the great revolutionary like Michelangelo, you know. With the Eroica, you hear the foundation stones of the Romantic period. Yes. Michelangelo with the Sistine Chapel, consciously, unconsciously, starts the Baroque.
Yes.
Some of these creators find themselves at these moments. Schoenberg is the same thing. Schoenberg takes whatever he learns from Wagner and then breaks and founds another period. So these people at the juncture of history, of different styles, we have to know all that. And we have to know not only the symphonies, we have to know his leader, we have to know. If you don't know Schubert's songs and Schubert's chamber music, you cannot do his symphonies. Because Schubert never heard a single symphony of his. He never heard them. Nobody ever performed them. So, but we hear. I just did a mass of Schubert. And there's so much of his chamber music and some things of his symphonies that creep in. Because it's, of course, the same man, the same handwriting.
It is knowledge, yes, but at the same time, when you're on stage, you feel, of course, every second that you're in command, although you're communicating with
yeah, that's a technical command that you learn that conducting opera a lot. Because in the opera, you're not conducting in a bel canto situation, you're conducting accompaniment, yes. But even in a Mozart opera, in the finale of the second act of Figaro, it's polyphony. It's not accompaniment. And there are about 10 tempo changes in one finale of Mozart. You have to know the style of how to go from one tempo to the other, because in those days there was no conductor really.
No, it was the first.
Musicians have to know exactly which tempo relates to which tempo so that they go from one to the other. All this has to be worked on at rehearsals, but without the knowledge, the conductor can't impart that. Some conductors, then they're instinctive.
Yeah.
They're instinctive. They instinctively know this and they instinctively know that. I'm not like that. I know exactly what I know and what to impart. Now I learned a new style recently, Janacek.
Right.
You know, I didn't know that style before. And Janacek is a product of his time. He doesn't take so much from Wagner, but he knows Puccini and he knows his Dvorak before. So there's a direct line between Dvorak and Janacek, etc. So it was for me a real challenge to conduct in a language that you don't understand, in singers who don't pronounce quite well, although we had an expert teaching them the Czech pronunciation, which I couldn't correct. Yeah. So for the first time I felt a little bit frustrated.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Maestro. It's highly interesting. We're looking forward to tonight's concert, and I'm sure the Eroica will be again in a different way, but as grandiose as it was. Yeah.